Welcome back to Dragon Dreams. Have you ever been a GM who felt like awarding experience points is like doing your taxes? Have you ever been a player who felt that the experience point system did not reward you for the things that you think you ought to be rewarded for? This video is for you. Stay tuned. So I just put out the 2E version of exploration-based experience points. So this is something that I had put out the 1E version of on DriveThruRPG a few years ago. But after playtesting it more, I realized that my old version was kind of shabby and didn't work very well. So I have a new version of this, and it's up now. Link in the description below. So let me start with the problem I'm trying to solve. Okay. So the problem I have is back in the old days in TSR D&D, they gave you experience points mostly for treasure, 1 gold piece per XP, and secondarily for monsters. Now that wasn't such a bad system. Like I'm going to discuss, there's been a lot of discussion on the OSR blogosphere and, videosphere of why that's actually a pretty good way to do things. Then when Wizards of the Coast got a hold of it, they changed it to monster-centric. So you don't get experience points for treasure, you get experience points for killing monsters. They also, admittedly, they have Milestone, which is trying to solve the problem, so you're not just getting experience points for beating up monsters, you're also getting XP for accomplishing goals. I get that. But I personally think that the monster killing experience point system is a bad way to do things. I think the treasure-based XP system is a little better, but I think it still has problems. And that's what I'm trying to address. So I'm not going to rehash the argument that I've heard from a ton of OSR and old school fans that the WotC monster-based experience points is kind of lame because you only get XP for, fighting the monsters and you have to kill them, as opposed to in the old days, you got XP for treasure and you could sneak past the monsters and actually get more XP because, you figure out some other way to deal with the monsters, but you ended up getting the treasure and running out of the dungeon before they caught you or something. And I understand that argument, okay? So one of the problems that I'm trying to solve, though, is that, as I said in the intro, I feel like awarding XP is like doing my taxes. Whether it's monster-based or more treasure-based, I have to keep notes on all the different monsters that were killed. I have to keep notes on all the treasure that was found. I have to tally everything up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And it's kind of like, it's not really what I want to be doing with a role-playing game. Like, I have to do things like that at work. That sounds like work to me, not like fun. So I wanted, first of all, an experience point system that's a lot easier, but that's not subjective the way the milestone XP is. Like, what I think a lot of us old school gamers don't like about milestone is not the general idea that you're rewarding people for, achieving certain goals. I get that. But rather that it just feels kind of subjective. it's kind of like it's just, there's no actual framework, it doesn't seem like, to milestone. It might as well just be called the give people XP when you feel like it system. And I feel like, as a player, I don't want to be beholden to a GM who just, gives like milestone experience, and maybe they don't give me very much when I think I deserved more. And there's no actual framework for me to say, hey, I don't think that was really fair. The nice thing about having a framework for how XP is rewarded is that the GM and players can discuss it, and somebody can say, well, I don't feel like you rewarded enough XP last session. And it's like, okay, well, you found like X amount of treasure, you killed X amount of monsters, or, as we're going to see in a second, you explored X number of rooms or hexes or something, and therefore telling that up, this is what you get. It's a little bit more cut and dry, right? And that would make me feel better, because as a player, then I could go, okay, you know what, you're right. And the GM might say, and like, you missed some of the treasure. Like, there was some treasure that, like, some rooms you didn't really search very thoroughly, and you could have. So, the first thing that I want to do is to come up with an experience point system that a GM can award experience points very, very quickly and easily, without relying on some sort of subjective system where it's just down to their whim. The other thing that I'm trying to do with this XP system is to come up with a way that appropriately rewards players the way I think they should be rewarded. So that needs a little bit of unpacking. Obviously, it's quite subjective what people should be rewarded for, but this is the closest thing we have to a scoring system, okay? And so I think it matters what you get XP for. So I don't like monster-based XP because it punishes players for thinking outside the box in finding alternative ways, like getting past monsters, tricking monsters, whatever. Well, that's been pretty well covered by a lot of old school gamers who say that they prefer treasure-based. I also don't really like treasure-based, though, to be honest, because it rewards greed. It basically frames the game as a treasure hunt. And what if you just want to be a hero and, heroism is his own reward? Some people like that. So I wanted a system that would reward what I think is important at my table, given how I run, and to reward things in the way that I would want to be rewarded if I were a player. Admittedly, there are many ways to cut the XP pie, okay? And other people may want to reward players for different things. Some people may really like milestone experience points because even though it's kind of subjective, it could reward, like heroism, for instance. That's all true. But I have my reasons for thinking that exploration rewards is really central, at least to the way that I tend to run things, in a way that I think a lot of OSR GMs run things and a lot of OSR players play. So let me explain why I think that. So for me, rewarding exploration is the best possible way to handle this. I realize there's, pros and cons to anything that we do because different GMs and different players are going to want different things. But the reason why I like exploration for the way that I run and the way that I play, which is mostly dungeon crawling and hex crawling and things like that, is because what it means is that the amount that you explore factors in to how much experience points you get, rather than either the monsters you kill or the treasure you gain. So that way it's not a monster hunt, and it's not a treasure hunt. It is an exploration game, which is how I'm usually doing things, and you're rewarding the players for exploring, which is matches the reason why I'm usually GMing and usually playing. So let's take a look here at my rules and we will see what I've done. So basically, if I scroll down here to the table, which is at the crux of all of this, the concept is that the game master assigns a level to each location. All right, which might be a dungeon room, it might be a hex, it might be a point on a point crawl. It could be a lot of things. It could be a place in a town. So LL stands for location level. And this maps to character level, all right? So in other words, a location level is the level that a location is rated for. So like, for instance, if it's LL3, that means that it's a location that is rated for a level 3 character, meaning it's going to be appropriately challenging for a level 3 party. And the, like for a level 2 party, it might be kind of difficult. For a level 4 party, it might be like a little easier, right? And so what I've done is I've basically come up with XP assignments for each location level and for each type of location: dungeon room, hex, and point for a point crawl. Now, you'll notice that, first of all, it goes up exponentially. That's because I'm mapping it to the fact that most OSRs and old school D&D has things go up exponentially. So what I kind of had in mind here was, if you look at the fighter's XP chart from old school, you'll see that it's like 2,000 to gain second level, 4,000 to gain third level, 8,000 to gain fifth level, and so forth, right? So these XP on this chart here maps very closely to that. So the idea is you need to explore about 20 dungeon rooms or 20 hexes to level up if you're a fighter. And I sort of see fighters as being kind of middling in old school D&D. Like, I think it was like thieves and clerics need less XP, magic users need more XP. So that was kind of what I took as being kind of a midpoint. That's debatable. Obviously, I'm sure I'm going to get all sorts of people in the comments saying that's not the dead mean or average of the, whatever. But who cares? The point is that it was basically just a starting point for making this. And if you're wondering why I made points for a point crawl 5 times what dungeon rooms and hexes are, the reason is that I tend to think of a point crawl as being like there's a lot of work to get to each point. So like in a point crawl, obviously for a fighter to gain second level, she or he would only need like 4 points. But that might be something like you have to get, the chalice from, the sunken ruin in the swamp of dread. And then you need to go up to, the Tor of Doom, to the stone circle there, and, when the moon is full, like, a pearl will appear in the middle of the stone circle, and you have to get that. And then, whatever, like there's 2 other places you have to go or something, right? And so it's sort of like there's a lot, each one of those is kind of like a little mini adventure. Obviously, you could tune these up or down as you see fit. It's intended with the idea that, you're the GM and you're empowered to change the rules. This is just meant to give people a starting point. Now, if you look at the 8+ row at the bottom, you'll see that I don't go past 8. The reason is that in a lot of the old school D&D and a lot of OSRs, everything doubles through level 7, and then around 8th level, it starts being a fixed amount that you go up by each level. All right. So, mileage may vary. If your game that you're playing doubles at a different point, all right, fine. You can adjust, but I think you can probably extrapolate how it's going to go, right? Like if there was a row for 9, and this is assuming a game in which 9 doubles from what the XP was for 8, obviously it's going to go up to, 12800 from 6400, right? And it's going to go up to 64,000 from 32,000, right? So you get the idea. Apologies for the scratching sound of the moment ago. I'm not actually sure what that is. Like, I didn't actually brush against the microphone, but maybe I got close to it and waved my hand in some weird way or something. All right. So basically, I think you can get the idea here. There's these certain rewards for locations explored. Now, let me explain to you how this works. This isn't just you stuck your big toe in the room. That's not what it means. What it means is you have to have gone significantly into a dangerous location to assume the dangers of that location. So if there are traps, you have to have gone deep enough in to have had to worry about those traps. Maybe you disarm them. Maybe you don't trigger them, right? But you had to have gone in far enough for that to be a danger. If there's monsters in the room, you have to have gone far enough in that you would have had to have dealt with the monsters. Maybe you sneak past them. Great. Good on you. The point is you only get these if there was danger that you assumed. What this also means is that an empty room where, like I didn't roll for wandering monsters, for instance, doesn't really award any experience points. If it's just like an empty storeroom or something, all right, you don't get XP for it. That might have a tactical advantage, though, because it might be the place that you spike the door and sleep for the night in the dungeon, which is a good resource to have. Now you may ask, well, what about monsters and treasure? Well, as far as monsters are concerned, you still have to deal with the monsters in some way, shape, or form. As I said, there are still dangers involved, and you only get the XP if it was a dangerous location. You don't get this, say, for moving through a hex of farmland, right? Where, like, unless there was like a random encounter, or unless there's like, raiding orcs marauding through it or something, obviously then in that case you would. But if it's just like peaceful farmland and there's like a nice road and you can just ride a cart down and, blah, 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 and nothing really bad happens, there's no expectation anything is going to happen, you don't get any XP. We're just traveling through peaceful farmland, right? It's not until you enter, some forest full of, baddies that you get it, right? Now, you might ask, well, what about treasure, Ivan? Well, treasure is its own reward, right? You're still an incentive to get treasure because you want treasure, you want to make money, all right? So what I really like about travel-based experience is that it rewards you for sort of all of the things that you're doing in a dungeon crawl or a hex crawl or whatever it is that's exploration based by giving you XP no matter how you solve the problem or dealt with the danger, right? And I feel like that's a much more direct way to award XP than treasure or monsters. It's like if you want to reward people for doing a good job of exploring a dangerous place, reward them for the actual places they explored, is my thinking. So that's why this system is so good for players. What about for GMs? This system is so easy. You could probably award XP at the end of the session just by counting up how many rooms they got to. Like if you're, assigned, like if it's, say it's the Caves of Chaos, right? And you have the lower caves where there's kobolds and goblins, and the middling caves where there's like orcs and hobgoblins, and the upper caves where there's like, minotaurs and, the cult of chaos and whatnot, right? Since Keep on the Borderlands, which is where the Caves of Chaos is, in case you didn't know, is rated for levels 1 to 3, you could just very easily say all the rooms in the lower caves are LL1, location level 1. All the ones in the middling tier are LL2, and all the ones in the upper tier are LL3 because it's organized such that the lower caves are easy, the middling caves are medium, and the high caves are hard. All right, so what that means, or let's say you're doing an island exploration, you could just say, all right, like most of the island is levels 4 to 6, so most of the island is going to be like rated for 4th level. Like some of the more difficult parts of the island are more like 5th level, and then like the plateau in the middle of the island where the Black Pearl is going to be rated at 6th level. All right, and all you have to do for this session is just add everything up. Like you just count how many it is and multiply. Another thing is that I didn't explain is that the numbers on the table are per PC rather than for the whole party. And I like that better because I don't want to add up a bunch of stuff and then divide by the number of PCs. It's like, it's so much easier on me if you just give people that amount. Now that's maybe debatable. Like people might go, well, you know, it's not really terribly fair if it was just 3 people versus 6 people. Maybe not. Like you could, you know, if you really wanted to do it that way, you could like, you know, multiply this out a little bit and, you know, multiply the XP by the expected number of members of the party, or say, you know, it's rated for, you know, location level 3 and it's also rated for, you know, with the assumption that there's like 5 characters in the party or something, right? You could easily expand what I've done, but that's how I like it, and so that's how I did it, right? And so like this is so easy. I have calculated XP in under a minute, and I think you can too. So what do you think? Tell me in the comments. As always, please be polite. Let's have constructive conversations, right? So, you know, I don't want to just, you know, have somebody like be a jerk and just be like, oh, you're wrong, like F you. But, you know, if you disagree, great. Like, I want to hear you disagree. Like, explain to me why exactly you disagree. Have you tried something like this before? I mean, I know this is not original to me. I'm not claiming that it is, but it's my way of doing things. And I honestly, I don't hear people talking a lot about exploration-based XP. So what do you think? How do you do things? How do you make things easier on the GM or the players? Until next time, everybody, happy dreaming.